If this is one of those days, I'm really glad you're here. This is Kallaborate, where joy becomes your foundation. Not the loud kind of joy, but the kind you build, piece by piece, after life changes everything. I'm Francene, and I'm walking this with you. If you were here in the last episode, we stepped into some very tender places together. We talked about suicide loss, the silence that follows it, and what it means to hold compassion for both the people who leave and the people left behind. If that conversation brought up a lot inside you, I just want to begin here today gently. You do not have to carry all of this alone. One of the hardest parts of grief is how lonely it can feel, even when people are around you, even when people love you. There's this strange space grief creates where you can be surrounded by people and still feel emotionally alone. Because sometimes people care deeply, but they don't know how to sit beside pain they cannot fix. Honestly, before all of this, I don't think I fully understood that either. For years after losing Kat, I either stayed away from people completely or I learned how to hide the sadness. Not because it wasn't there, not because I was okay, but because I could feel how uncomfortable grief made people. Friends stopped calling as much. Conversations changed. Sometimes people disappeared completely because they didn't know what to do with someone who was sad all the time. That creates another layer of loneliness nobody really prepares you for. Not just grieving the person you lost, but grieving the version of connection you thought you would still have with others afterwards. I remember one moment very clearly. I was at work, and they changed where I sat. Such a small thing, really. In the big picture of life, it should not have mattered that much. But I completely melted down. Not because of the desk, not because of the move itself. It was because it felt like one more thing changing. One more thing I had no control over. When my entire world already felt shattered. I think that's something people misunderstand about grief sometimes. It's rarely just about the moment in front of you. It's the accumulation, the exhaustion, the constant adapting, the nervous system carrying more than it knows how to hold. That was one of the first moments where I realized I could not carry all of this alone anymore. The truth is, very few people in my life really knew how to hold grief emotionally. The one person who truly sat with me exactly as I was my younger sister. Even then, she was grieving too. That's what makes loss so complicated sometimes. The people trying to hold you up are often carrying their own heartbreak at the same time. But she stayed, not trying to fix me, not trying to rush me into being okay, just there. Honestly, sometimes that matters more than perfect words ever could. There were also things that didn't help. Trying to explain my grief to people who had never experienced deep loss or who didn't believe mental illness was real often made me feel even more alone. Because when someone hasn't lived that kind of pain, they sometimes try to solve it instead of sit beside it. Or they search for a reason that would make it feel safer to them somehow. But grief doesn't usually need solutions first. It needs presence. One of the things I slowly realized was that people who could hold me emotionally most safely were often people who had experienced devastating loss themselves, especially parents who had lost children, or people who had lost someone to suicide. Because when someone else truly understands that kind of pain, words are not always required. There's just recognition, a look, a silence, a presence that says, "You don't have to explain this to me." There were moments after I shared my story publicly where someone would quietly hug me afterward or stop by my desk just to check on me, or look at me with tears in their eyes and simply say, "Thank you." In those moments, I could physically feel what it meant to be seen. Not fixed, not rescued, just understood. I realized something else, too. Holding space for me was also helping them hold space for themselves. Because grief recognizes grief, even when very little is spoken out loud. Honestly, that's part of why Kallaborate exists. Because so many people are carrying invisible pain while feeling emotionally homeless inside the world around them. I wanted to create a space where people could feel seen exactly where they are, without needing to minimize their grief to make other people feel comfortable. For me, healing didn't begin with suddenly feeling okay. It began with connection, slowly becoming possible again. Therapy helped. Writing helped. Sharing my story helped. Every time someone quietly connected with their own loss afterward, something inside me felt less alone too. Learning public speaking and eventually talking openly about Kat changed something inside me. Because every time I spoke her name out loud, ache loosened a little more. One of the things that meant the most to me was that my family, my husband, my sister, supported me sharing our story publicly, talking about suicide awareness, talking about Kat, talking about grief, honestly. That support mattered deeply because silence had already taken enough from us. Even now, if I'm being honest, I still sometimes struggle with being held emotionally by people close to me. Trauma changes the way safety feels. Sometimes it feels easier to support others than to fully let yourself fall apart in front of someone else. Healing doesn't always happen in a straight line. Vulnerability doesn't suddenly become effortless just because you've done healing work. But I've learned this much gently over time. Connection does not require perfection. Sometimes it simply begins with letting someone sit beside you honestly. I used to think strength meant carrying everything quietly by myself. Now I think real strength sometimes looks like allowing yourself to be seen, even in the messy middle of grief. Not performing healing, not pretending you're okay. Just slowly learning that you deserve support too. Maybe that's part of rebuilding joy too. Not returning to who you were before, but finding people, spaces, and moments where your heart no longer has to hide. Joy is not something I lost. It's something I rebuilt. And part of rebuilding was learning that being seen honestly is safer than carrying everything silently. So if you've been hiding your sadness, isolating yourself, or feeling like nobody truly understands what you carry, I want you to hear this gently today. Your pain does not make you too much. You do not have to earn support by pretending to be okay first. Sometimes healing begins with one honest conversation, one safe person, one moment where you finally exhale a little. If you haven't found that yet, I hope this space reminds you that you are not as alone as grief sometimes makes you feel. If this episode met you somewhere tender today, I'm really glad we found each other. If this conversation brought up something heavy for you today, please be gentle with yourself afterward. You don't have to carry this perfectly. You just have to keep taking the next step. We'll keep walking through this together, one conversation at a time. I see you. If you're rebuilding, one piece at a time, follow Kallaborate wherever you listen to podcasts and be part of the conversations ahead.